Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to my full review of this, the Dificiano Marlin. If the name rings a bell, perhaps you remember its cameo appearance in Loom Wars Episode 4, the most recent installment of the Loom Wars series and the first video that I released just as we were all getting shut in our houses thanks to COVID-19. Or about 3 kilograms ago in my case. Now the fact that it featured in Loom Wars at all, it didn't make it past the quarterfinals, but the fact that it was there speaks volumes for where I see one of the strengths of this watch, that being the loom. I've talked about it before. If a manufacturer is looking to cut costs and cut corners, especially on a dive watch, one of the first things to go is the loom. Conversely, if you get a watch with decent loom, chances are the rest of the piece is going to have been manufactured to a fairly high standard. And that's the case with the Dificiano today. I'm quite impressed with the watch overall. Now this is an ex-Kickstarter project. It launched last year on Kickstarter, but the watch on my wrist is a full production unit, and a full production unit that was sent to me for free by the manufacturer. I don't have to send it back. But as always, don't just take my word for it. There are plenty of written reviews and plenty of other YouTube videos about this one if you're keen. So we know the loom is good. Is the rest of the watch any good? Let's flip the camera and find out. Alright, before I get into the watch roll today, let's talk price. I will obviously leave a link in the description of the video to the Dificiano website. These ones are quoted at $399 US. Now, I just missed getting this review up in time for a Chinese New Year sale they had, knocking 15% off. Send them an email, send them an Instagram message, tell them that Jody sent you, and I'm sure they'll bring the price of this one back down to around the $350 USD. I probably don't talk about that enough. The great straight-to-market model that micro brands are the specialists of means that you can send an email to the brand owner and ask them for a discount, and more often than not, they'll have the margin available to give you a discount. Now, only a 1-year warranty, which is a bit of a disappointment. I always complain if a brand doesn't give you 2, but the watch itself, I must say, is a pretty solid all-round package. So 41mm in diameter across the bezel. Now, unlike the Citizen that I reviewed earlier on in the week, which had a bezel that sloped inwards, this one protrudes, coin edge bezel, nice and easy to grip. The case itself is 40mm in diameter, 14mm thick, just under 50mm lug to lug with drilled lugs, as you can see here. I'll pop this one on a Horween for a bit of fun later on. 20mm lug width. Fantastic grains of rice, beads of rice bracelet here. I'll talk about that at length later. That one tapers down from 20 to about 17.5, back up to 20, just over 20 at this diver's extension, built-in diver's extension clasp here, and sized up for my 7-inch wrist. This one weighs in at a not inconsiderable 170 grams. I got a bit of a shock when I put it on the scales though. It really doesn't feel like that. It doesn't look like a big watch. It's not a big watch. It's only a 41. I suspect a lot of the weight of this one comes from the bracelet and the bracelet clasp, but it carries that weight very well. So 316L stainless steel, case, crown, bezel and case back. Full stainless steel bracelet with solid links, solid end links, little screw links here. Great, these links. 7 links across here, 5 in the middle and 2 on the outer edges. And it is a proper mill clasp here with a diver's extension. Again, I'll talk about that later as well. The watch features a double dome sapphire crystal, just the merest dome on here, but I think that is a nice move. And a fully loomed ceramic bezel insert, 120 click unidirectional rotating dive time bezel, everything as you would want it to be, nice and solid, no backplay, no bounce. Let's get the loom video up early today then, and it is a bit of a party on your wrist after dark, this one. C3 Super Luminova and so much of it. Hands, indices, fully loomed ceramic bezel insert, and they have even loomed that chapter ring. Now I'll turn the speed up. As you can see, the chapter ring is the first thing to go, followed by the bezel insert, followed by the indices and the hands, which is the order you'd want them to fade in if you could specify. Overall though, really impressive with the loom. Especially when you come in from bright sunlight or you just turn the lights off, it really does glow. Case finishing is pretty simple, but it's all nicely done. Nice sharp edges there when you're transitioning between the mid case and the upper lug, all brushed finished here. Unguarded crown with a very faint logo, Marlin logo there. They could have tried a bit harder with that one, but nice and grippy, nicely machined bezel here as well. I guess the reason that they went for a slightly more demure and low-key all brushed case is because of the high polish to those mid links. There is quite a lot going on the bracelet, and let's not forget that bright orange chapter ring and bright orange hand on the dial. Now we're obviously retro here. I'm going to call this one as early 1970s, but we're not retro in the sense that there's faux patina on the hands and indices as discussed. They're using colour and that beads of rice to tell you that this one is aping the look of the 1970s rather than going for a faux patina vintage look on the dial and hands. 4 colourways you perhaps noticed from the website earlier on. I reckon the 2 ends are the most successful, the pale blue one and this orange one. I specifically asked for the orange and black. I think a great contrast here. It's a good look overall. So we have kind of truncated triangular arrowhead indices all the way around the dial applied. Larger ones at the 12, the 3 and the 9, smaller ones everywhere else. And we do have a date frame around the integrated date window at the 6 p.m. I think always a good choice moving it down there at 6 rather than punching a hole in the dial at 3. Just the Dificiano name printed in block capitals above the pinion and 300 meters beneath. And just squeezing in there around the date frame is the word automatic. So I don't think they've overcooked the dial at all. You don't really need to overcook the dial when there's this much colour on the watch, do you? Nice handset, again high polish there with a bevel in the middle. This watch really does play with the light, matching the high polish surrounds to those indices, the date frame, and of course the high polish to those mid links of the beads of rice bracelet. Another little bit of colour there, that lollipop second hand I think is a good touch. Overall, I like the dial, it's retro, it's a little bit kitschy, but it's not overdone, plenty of colour, but still remaining legible. Let's have a look at that bracelet then. I think these beads of rice, grains of rice bracelets are becoming a more and more common alternative now to the Jubilee, and I think they pretty much do the same job. They've got that level of flexibility and comfort that is inherent in the Jubilee with a bit more complexity and a really, really nice look, nice feel to this one. Satinized brush on the outer links, high polish on those segmented mid links as well here. Screws, as I mentioned, all very easy to operate. Now, it is a chunky clasp on this one, milled clasp as noted. It's still a little bit stiff. This is a fairly new watch, and it's got a built-in diver's extension at the back end. Now, there is a small 3-hole micro adjust here. These links are small enough that you can just about get away with that. That means that you don't have to rely on this diver's extension as your micro adjust, but it does give you the option to use that over the course of a day if you are going in and out of water or there's a big temperature change and your wrist either swells or contracts. Case back also features the Marlin logo as found on the crown and on the bracelet clasp. I would say perhaps shallow etched rather than deep etched. It looks a little bit half-hearted. They could have either done something more substantial or not bothered at all, but there you go. Screw down, 200 meters of water resistance from this one, usual spec sheet, sapphire, and the ubiquitous NH35. NH35 really is the default choice of watches at this price. Solid if a little bit unspectacular. Certainly you can find Miyota 9000s in this price range, as I will talk about later on. Plus 6 seconds, plus 4 seconds there per day. Reasonable amplitude. Beat error a little higher than I've seen on some, but I'm sure still within the stated tolerances of the movement. 24 jewel hacking and hand winding auto. Chances are this one will tick reliably for many a year in the back of your watch though, so you can't complain too much about their choice of movement. And it wears nicely, I have to say. I've got an average size 7-inch wrist. Didn't really feel the 170 grams until I put it on the scales. And this is what I was talking about the way this watch plays with light. I think they've done it really nicely. Double dome sapphire, just the merest of dome there with anti-reflective undercoating, a flat, high polished, shiny ceramic bezel insert, those high polished surrounds to the indices and the hands. It all comes together really very nicely under my studio lights, and the same when I'll take this watch outside for you in just a minute or so. It is a little bit slab-sided, this one. I guess the NH35 means that there's an extra mil perhaps, as opposed to if they'd used a Miyota 9000, but I don't think it is ungainly. And a 50mm lug to lug, at least those lugs do curve down. There's a bit of help conforming to the wrist as well. I do like this colourway, I must say. That orange chapter ring really sets the watch off. Now it's quite a big, thick, chunky chapter ring, but it doesn't make the dial look too small, I don't think. Still nicely in proportion and still very legible. And there we are, that's it outside in some natural light, and you can see what I mean. There's just enough anti-reflective undercoating that it's still legible, but the sapphire crystal, that ceramic bezel insert, and all those high polished silver surfaces really do glint and play with the light very nicely indeed. That's the kind of side profile on wrist. Maybe they could have done with shaving a mil or two off those lugs, but that would have probably meant that they couldn't have them drilled, so I guess there's a bit of a compromise in that respect. But overall, it wears nicely, and as I said, it doesn't feel heavy at all. Now, I reckon this one, being a kind of 60s, 70s retro diver, would look great on a Tropic, but I don't happen to have a 20mm Tropic to hand. I must admit though, I've developed a bit of a penchant for a cross-stitched vintage Horween with these retro divers. I think that looks pretty good. So, well made, well machined. I like the colours, great bracelet and fantastic lume. This watch is not without its charms, but that doesn't mean to say there won't be moans and niggles. What am I going to complain about today? Well, I've already talked about the 1-year warranty. Really, 2 years should be standard on autos, even if this is your first crack at the watch market. Date down at 6, I appreciate that. I would have appreciated it even more if they had colour matched that date wheel. I think that would just have resolved the dial further. And the extension clasp, maybe a bit bulky. I don't mind this style, but I do think for all the time you're actually going to use that extension, they would have been better putting a standard double fold over security pusher with more micro adjusts. But then that's just me. If you are going to get this one wet on a regular basis and you are going to pop it over the top of a wetsuit, then I'm sure that is a boon. And then there's the price. This is such a competitive point in the market now, and I love the fact that it is so competitive. If you're looking for a $400 retro style micro brand diver, Richard Legrand Odyssey 3 now, that one features a Miyota 9000 for about $340 US, and they throw in a second strap as well. This watch reminds me a lot of the EMG Nemo, also featuring a Miyota 9000. That one's a bit more expensive at $450, but it does feature the beads of rice and a fantastic clasp. And Traska have just launched an updated version of the Freediver. That's Seiko NH35 powered, bang on $400, but full of interesting touches, and it's coated as well for extra durability. So that's a bit of a blessing and a curse for the Dificiano. Clearly it means that there's a demand for this style of watch, a demand that perhaps wasn't there 4 or 5 years ago, but it also means there's a level of competition that wasn't there 4 or 5 years ago as well. I can confidently recommend all 4 of those watches to you, including the Dificiano Marlin. I guess then it just comes down to your personal preference. Which brand speaks to you the most? Which colourway do you prefer? So there you have it, the Dificiano Marlin. If you're in the market for a $300 and something retro dive watch, you should definitely have a good look at this one. I think overall a very strong package, only a few minor moans and niggles today, a couple of things that I definitely think they could improve on if they do a Marlin V2, but overall well manufactured, well machined, good looking watch with a bit of colour on there as well. Thanks for watching, I will see you in a future video.